Hello and welcome to Blender Bite Size. In this video I'll be showing you how to make this material procedurally in Blender. Okay, let's dive straight in. So I have a basic scene set up here with a plane formed to make a backdrop. I've got some lighting trained on that backdrop and then 3 other lights trained on my object, which is basically a simple plane. This texture, by the way, or this material, is designed to work on a flat plane or a flat surface. So if you try and apply it to a 3D object, you might find it looks a bit weird. Anyway, obviously I've got the camera pointing at the object. So let's now switch over to the shading tab, and I've got viewport shading enabled, and of course I'm using Cycle's render engine. So let's select the plane that we want to apply the texture to, and let's start by applying a new texture to that. So we've got the basic principled BSDF, and we're not going to make any changes to that just now. We'll come back to that in a bit. Let's start by creating the cobble pattern itself. So for that we are going to need 2 Voronoi textures. So press Shift A and search for Voronoi texture. Shift D to duplicate that. We'll also need a math node. Now we're going to need a texture coordinate as well. So let's Control T to add the texture coordinate and get rid of the mapping node. We're using the UV output, and that's going into the vector. Plug that into the vector on both of those Voronoi textures. We're also going to need to control the scale on these 2 plus others. So let's use a value node to do that. Scale and scale. Okay. Let's start plugging things in so you can see what's going on. We'll plug the distance from the top Voronoi texture into the top value on the math node, and the bottom one into the bottom value again on the math node, and set that to subtract. Now let's plug that into the base color and see what we have. Not a great deal right now. What we're going to do is add another math node. Oops. Set that again to subtract. Plug the distance from the bottom Voronoi texture into the bottom value, and set the top value at 0.9. Now we need to make a couple of changes to the Voronoi textures to make this work. On the top, set the dimensions to 2 dimensions. And on the bottom, again, set that to 2 dimensions. And this time, smooth F1. Set the smoothness to 0.55. And so that we see something, we need to enter the value to control the scale, which is currently set at 0. Let's put that as 12. Okay, there we go. We've now got essentially what looks like cobblestone, or even giraffe if you're desperate. So that's the basic pattern. Let's now take a look at the color and texture. In fact, actually, let's, while we're here, start framing things so we've got a better idea of what's happening. Now for the color and texture, we're going to start this off with a noise texture. Connect up the UV output from the texture coordinates to the vector on the noise texture, and also use the value node to control the scale here. Now we're going to need a map range node, a math node, and in actual fact we're going to duplicate both of those as well. And we will also need a color ramp. So let's connect these up and then isolate it to see what's going on. So we're going to take the factor from the noise texture into the value from the map range, or the first map range anyway. Set the from min to 0.3, from max to 0.6, to min 0.01, and to max 0.1. Let's see what that's given us. Not a great deal right now. On the noise texture, set the detail to 5, roughness to 0.6, and leave the distortion as 0. Connect up the factor from the noise texture to the top value on the math node and set it to multiply. And set the bottom value to 0.8. This is going to get plugged into the bottom value on this math node, which we need to set to subtract. We're then going to take this map range node and plug that into that math node, and we'll bring this map range and plug it into the from min. Now for the value, we are going to take that from this top math node where we created the cobble pattern. So let's see what that's given us so far. Again, not a huge amount. We're going to take this subtract and plug it into the color ramp. Let's bring that up. We're going to set the value to cardinal. And just heading back over to this map range node here, we're going to set the from max to 0, to min to 0, and leave that at 1. So now you can see we've got quite a bold pattern forming because the color ramp is just giving us black and white. But here's where we're going to start getting some color involved. So we're going to add a third stop. On the first stop, we're going to make quite a dark, let's go for a dark, a darkish yellow. So on the HSV, sorry, it's hue 0.135, saturation 0.325, and value 0.01. Now move your cursor over that color block and Control C to copy. Then Control V after you've selected that second stop to place it in, and then increase the value to quite a light version of that color. Let's say 0.5 on the value for now. Paste it again in that third color and do something like 0.35, maybe a bit more, or a bit less, sorry, 0.25, somewhere around there. We're going to take that middle stop and crunch it down, and again with that third stop. Okay, let's reconnect the principled shader, and now let's get a mix RGB node. In later versions of Blender, this has been changed to just a generic mix node, and you have to select the particular things you want to mix. Now we're going to take this color ramp Bring it up and plug it into color 1. Disconnect this and set this to quite a dark grey. Let's say 0.1. Yeah. Now you might wonder why I disconnected this. That's because we're going to plug it through a couple of other nodes before it kind of heads into that. So we need to move these over. And these are basically the ones that form the colour and texture, or the basic colour and texture. So let's just organise those a bit and frame them as well. But what we want to do is put in some variation because it's very uniform right now. So we're going to combine these through a couple of other nodes to give us a lot of variation. So we're first going to grab us a hue saturation node, plonk that in between the color ramp and the mix node. The fact that it's gone into color is fine. We also now need a mix RGB. Plonk that in there. Move it to color 2. And then take the color of the color ramp and plug that into color 1 on this second mix node. Set that to overlay. And for the factor input, we're going to take the output from the map range, the second map range in your color and texture frame, and plug that in there. And you can now already see there are variations in the color and tone here, so that's good. That's working. We need to feed a couple of other things in here though. From the subtract math node, top left, take the value, plug that into the value here, and you can see that instantly darkened it. And the saturation, we're going to take the color output from the Voronoi texture at the bottom in our cobble pattern. So drag that out and plug it into the saturation, and that just intensifies it. Then for the hue, we're going to leave it at 0.5 for now and see how we go. Okay, right. So that's where we are at the moment. So let's frame this one and call it color variation. Now next up, I want to add a little more detail as well. So I'm going to start by adding a texture coordinate, if I could spell. Follow that with a noise texture. Then a map range. Then a math node. And now we can start fiddling around with them. So we're going to take the UV from there to there. Factor from there to the value in the map range. The result from that into this top slot on the math node, and let's go change that to power, and then the value from that into the factor of the mix node. For the scale on the noise texture, 8.5. For the detail, 4.25. For the roughness, 0.725. Now in the map range, the from min is 2.2, then 0.6, then 0 and 1. And the exponent on the power is going to be 1.8. Change this mix node to darken, and you can see what's happening. It's darkening those areas that are cement and increasing the detail in the cobble itself. So this is cobble detail. Now we've still got a couple of other things to do. First, we're going to add a bump node. Plug that into the normal of the principled shader. Take the value from the subtract node in the color and texture and plug that into height. And you can see it's already puffed them out. But we're going to drop the strength down to 0.5. And the distance to 0.01. So there you go. That's working. It's good. Next up, I want to add a little wetness to the cobblestones. For that, I will need a color ramp. Plug that into the roughness. And take the value from the color variation, plug that into the factor of the color ramp, and you can see it's very, very shiny all over right now. The first thing that I'm going to do on that color ramp is flip it, and then I'm going to bring that black value all the way over. So if I actually isolate this whilst I'm doing that, you'll see what's happening. It's basically intensifying the edges or the texture on the cobblestones themselves, but it's not affecting the actual mud in between, which is good. Because then we can basically make the cobblestones very wet and keep the cement rough, or just have little patches of moisture as if it's been raining or there's condensation or frost, not frost, dew on there. That's how you would control that. So let's give that a frame all of its own. And let's call that moisture. Now, we're almost there. Just a few things here. You can control the overall scale of the cobblestones using the value at the very start. So you don't have to mess around trying to guess which of these nodes will control the scale. In fact, let's name that cobblestone scale. There you go. When it comes to the pattern and stuff, obviously you've got all of this to play with. It helps if you isolate using the control shift and left click on a node to isolate to see what's going on at each stage of your changes. But I think we're just about there. So let's send that to render. And there we go, there's our finished cobblestone. There's lots of texture and detail going on here. Obviously, as I mentioned, you've got plenty of ways to play with all of the different factors. You can obviously change the pattern, do various things with the smoothness and scale. You can crunch these a bit more to get difference in tone. Ultimately, go crazy and just play around with every value and see what you get. This one here, this map range, obviously controls the size of the stones, so you can get different levels of cement and stuff going on. Yes, okay, so that's it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to give the video a thumbs up, and of course subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications of future videos. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.